So in terms of this session here, I'm going to start now by introducing my expert panel. So if we go in alphabetical order, so Dragos, maybe you can introduce yourself first.
Thank you very much, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Dragos Munteanu, I'm the head of safety of IATA, responsible for the implementation of our IATA safety strategy. Glad to be on this call.
Fantastic. Thanks for having you with us, Dragos. And next, Nicola.
Hey everyone, Nicola Nirida. I am an operational air traffic controller for the past 30 odd years and the coordinator for communications for IFATCA, the International Federation of Air Traffic Controllers Associations.
Great to have you with us. And Nikki next.
Hi, I'm Nikki Jones and I work for the European Transport Workers Federation and coordinate all their work with EASA. And my background was cabin crew for a very large commercial airline. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. And last but not least, Paul.
Yes, hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. John, I'm Paul Reuter. I'm a 737 captain with a European operator and I'm the vice president of the European Cockpit Association.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining and great to have you all with us. So just to kind of set the scene a little bit for what we've been doing within the summer campaign generally. So we started at the end of May with an initial webinar. Actually, Dragos was on with a number of our EASA colleagues talking about the different safety challenges that we were facing at the industry level. And then we've had various different events and webinars. We did a specific live cabin crew webinar from Norway. We've had various other different programs and activities. We launched at the end of June our latest edition, the summer edition of the Conversation Aviation magazine, and we'll continue to promote the different safety topics in that. Similarly, the organisations that have joined us on this session all have their own different, very targeted promotion to their different communities. So the European Cockpit Association have an excellent campaign, particularly aimed at flight crew around different areas. I'm sure Paul will talk a bit more about that as we go through. Similarly, ETF have things as well, IFATCA, and then also IATA specifically for their airline members and their safety issues hub and other resources. So if you're looking for resources to help your own summer activities, there are lots of great materials out there. And what I'll do is as we go through the discussion, I'll drop some of the links for some of the different resources into the chat. So if you want to then access them as we go, then you can do that. So we're going to start the discussion just talking about some of the main challenges, particularly in this session. We want to focus on the staff and the frontline operational workers in the industry who, we've got this 3-4 month period of this summer season now. We're really starting to approach the peak. Many countries, the schools are broken up and families are traveling. So we've got all these different staff, all kind of, we're running a marathon, but almost doing it in 100-meter sprints. So it's how do we help our staff get through the summer and particularly as organisations be prepared for how we're going to support our staff to operate safely over the next 2, 3, 4 months and beyond. So if we start, maybe Paul, if I come to you from the flight deck perspective, what do you see from the flight crew side as some of the main summer challenges that staff are going to face across your part of the industry?
Yes, thank you, John. I think the main issues are like every summer we're going to see a maximum of flights operated in a very finite airspace, and so we will probably have to deal with disruptions, with crews going out of duty, with weather delays, maybe some air traffic delays. We know some countries, without naming them, like to go on strike in summer as well. And for flight crew, it's going to be the daily hassle to make sure that our passengers arrive safely. We're going to have to manage through a very busy airspace. There will probably be fatigue issues, crews running out of duty. So all of this is probably putting a lot of stress on our people, and with the main objectives that we cannot lose is obviously trying to operate all these flights safely despite all the challenges.
And you've got quite a lot of material from the ECA side that you've developed and you've been promoting over the summer already. And actually, we have the links to all of that from our summer campaign page that I'll drop in the links here in a minute. But maybe you could talk a bit about some of the material that you've been promoting over the summer so far.
Yes, we started promoting this actually, I think, in 21, 22 already. After COVID, regularly we have these summer campaigns. One very central thing is our defensive flying checklist, as we call it, where we basically try to raise the awareness with our flight crews on ultimately, despite whatever disruptions that you are facing, what are the important points that we would like you to take care of. I mean, take care of yourself, of your crew. Try to, don't go for shortcuts. Don't go operationally. Don't deviate from your SOPs, despite sometimes having this feeling that you're under pressure. We have quite a lot of material on fatigue, on how to report fatigue as well, because I think it's important for the system to learn year after year and hopefully improve. And then, of course, we have, which is going to be, again, one big issue, I think, is we have some very clear guidelines and explanations on commander's discretion. And I think in general, it's quite a full package that we can offer not only flight crews, but of course, anyone who's interested in trying to contextualize the issues that we think we'll be facing.
Yeah, and we'll come back and talk a bit about fatigue and those topics a little bit later. Maybe if I come to you, Nikki, now from your side, you cover lots in ETF, you cover lots of different parts of the workforce. What are some of the challenges that those parts of the workforce that you look after are facing now?
Yeah, at ETF we cover the ATM, ground handling, excuse me, and cabin crew, and some pilots. Some of the main issues are around staff shortages, the lack of expertise, the level of expertise, and some of the standard of training. We also have concerns similar to Paul around crews being pushed to the maximum of their FDPs, and then the continual use of commander's discretion, fatigue issues, and another area of concern that's coming in, and as Paul touched on, is follow your SOPs. But there is the development of a culture where there's quite a lot of pressure from the employer if you are reporting any specific issues or concerns, and therefore it's the just culture. We have concerns around that, but we touch on that later. So those are some of our main concerns, and the health issues that this has on crew being totally, constantly pushed to the maximum.
And I think that's one of the big challenges, and certainly we have a lot of discussions. We have our different collaborative groups working with lots of different organisations, and I think it's important that organisations, we see more and more organisations now looking at what plans, and we talk a lot about resilience, but it's what does that mean at a practical level in terms of actions, and maybe Nicola, we come to you from the ATM side, because it's something that I think a lot of what other parts of the industry have done in some areas, the ATM world kind of came first in a lot of human factors and a lot of the certainly discussions on resilience in the system. So a lot of things that we talk about in other parts of the industry are kind of day-to-day operations for you in ATM.
Absolutely. Sorry, and I know there's going to be a lot of overlap between Nikki and Paul and myself. We absolutely, for ATM in particular, the increases in traffic, as Paul said, it is a finite resource, not just the airspace, but the airport capacities, and maxed out, constantly increasing levels of traffic and a constant short staff. So for ATM, those would be our big issues. We're a little bit luckier maybe than some other areas in that we're heavily regulated. 373 allows us to look at fatigue, and a lot of the ANSPs, our air navigation service providers, are incredibly proactive about things like capacity for sectors, which is where you see regulation. Your ATC delays, Paul, which irks me whenever I hear it's being said. But we are working always within those strictures. There are loads of other summer challenges. I mean, weather is a big one for the pilot community and for us. Fragmentation across the European region, also the geopolitical instability that can add a whole layer of complexity. And then, as I said, airport capacity. So for us, you know, there's a constant stream of possible challenges, but we have to view them as challenges, right? We have to look at them as things that we manage proactively to make sure that our staff are protected and that everything is safe, because that ultimately, for whether you're in the cockpit or whether you're in the ATC centre, whether you're on the ground or in the air, safety is the priority for all of us during the summer period.
And I think that's where maybe if I come to you next, Dragos, to bounce off that, because certainly from one of the things we've seen, particularly I think since the summer of 2022, when we had kind of the first proper ramp up, the industry has, it feels like we've got a lot better at collaborating across the industry. You know, this is now what, the fourth summer safety campaign that we've run, and I know Eurocontrol have done the same. You know, IATA's been at the heart of both of those activities and across the industry. Yeah, there's loads of stuff that we've been doing at an industry level to try and support organisations and the operational staff to get through the summer. And I know IATA similarly, you know, there's lots of topics that you're working on, and you know, maybe you can explain a bit more about your top issues, Dragos.
Thank you very much, John. And obviously the top issues have already been mentioned. This is the beauty of this industry, that we work in collaboration, and the challenges are similar, or we view these the same challenges from obviously the different viewpoints. Clearly, the workload of aviation staff is impacted by what's going on around us, and I think we are very aware of the last month and the challenges that the last months have introduced in a global aviation system. Geopolitical instability is still there. Huh? We have seen it. It's not anymore a summer issue. It's a constant issue. This brings GNSS issues, and we are focusing quite heavily on that. The area where this is happening has grown in size. It's almost everywhere now, with a lot of issues and a lot of potential problems. What we are seeing also, and this trickles into the sometimes the individual issues that the staff have, is the supply chain issues. The industry is ramping up. Unfortunately, not all, let's say, the stakeholders are able to ramp up. And one of the priorities for our operations advisory committee is the supply chain issues that unfortunately lead to lack of spare parts, lack of availability of spare parts, lack of availability of small things like even in the cabin environment, which all trickle, in fact, to pressure on the staff. The infrastructure that is limited, and ATC delays. I mean, we've been talking about it for so many years. Unfortunately, it's quite sad, since these issues have been known for maybe some of 20 years. We've been advocating quite a lot for improving the infrastructure, for unifying the infrastructure. We've been talking so much about a single European sky. We're not close to that. Unfortunately, we're still there, and we need to work in this environment. People still want to travel by air. We see this. It is a healthy increase, but obviously all of these are bringing back pressure. We see, well, obviously weather events, quite significant ones. We are glad that we have resilience built in the system. Just for everybody's information, super glad that Eurocontrol sometimes is having calls to organize the network even on a weekend, because in weekends sometimes we have the highest peaks of traffic, and lots of issues are associated with weekends. Then on our side, it's the same all we would say. Runaway safety, such a complex issue, such an issue that involves all of us and all the stakeholders that are around this table. We just recently, for instance, published a safety risk assessment about runaway excursions, and we've been working so much on runaway safety, and still there are issues that we can improve due to, for instance, the last accidents and significant incidents that we have seen. So it is a lot happening, but it is also a lot of information out there, and we have set as our mission to be very close to the airlines, but to all the stakeholders who would like to, for instance, get some information on a safety issue. Yes, as you mentioned, the Safety Issue Hub has grown to more than 100 safety issues, close to 200. And then it's not a list of of safety issues is a list of things that you can do to improve, or things that you can use to start your own risk assessment and be more resilient. But collectively, I think we'll be able to tackle all these significant challenges that we have.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing all the different topics that you talk about. In some ways, it's reassuring that we're all talking about the same thing. I think that's the first kind of really positive part of this, is that there's not suddenly something we see that takes us by surprise. So that's one of the good things. And we recently, last week, Nicola was there. We had a meeting of the airlines with two airports and various other people as part of our conversation aviation promotion activity. And one of the things we talked a lot about there is helping us see these different issues from the different stakeholder perspectives, so that we were talking, for example, about ramp safety, and particularly during the turnaround process, which is probably the best example of a situation that involves the people from the air traffic control side, getting the aircraft moving from the gate, flight deck, ramp, and actually all situations, particularly a situation where everybody's got a restricted view. The people in the tower probably can't see the gate at all, or they might see it through a camera. The flight deck, they can only see a certain amount outside the cockpit, and then similarly, the people on the ground, only see a certain amount of what's going on. And the more we can help each other understand our different perspectives, and I think that it's great that kind of we're all talking about the same things as a really positive side. So we talked about these different challenges, and one of the key things we talked about was particularly the staffing challenge and the resilience then of the system, and coping with individual staff members. And maybe Dragos, I come to you first on this one. Is what do we think? What are you advising that organisations can do to protect the safety of their operation and to support their staff over the summer on some of the key topics we've been talking about? Are there some key actions that you've been talking about with your operators?
So I have mentioned the Operations Advisory Council priorities. One of them is workforce resilience. So the issues related to workforce, the training, the brain drain after COVID, and all that we are still seeing happening in the industry is very much on the agenda of our colleagues. And there are so many ways in which you can tackle this, with improved procedures for training, with improved ways of training, EBT, new technologies for training staff. But safety comes from the top. And I would like to highlight a little bit what we're doing over there, because I think everybody understands the challenges of the industry. What we have tried to do in the last 2-3 years is bringing on the CEOs on board. And since all of them, they're signing this safety policy, we wanted to bring them, let's say, closer to their responsibility and make sure that there is no disconnect between the CEO and the C-suite level and the staff. And we have started with the Safety Leadership Charter. It is a document that you can easily find on our website, which has some very basic principles. Basically, the CEO needs to walk the talk, needs to have to instill an atmosphere in its own organization that basically safety is not reprimanded. If anybody needs to speak up about safety, this is not going to be forbidden, it's going to be welcomed, and basically there will be actions taken. We would like them to understand that safety needs to be involved and implemented into business processes. And very happy to say that we have had a very good traction from the IATA members and IOSA carriers. We have now more than 150 signatories, and the number is growing. But the intent is not really to have, let's say, just a number of one-pagers signed. We are building a resource with recommendations and with practical lessons learned, where the airlines can share what they have done good in terms of improving safety, how were they the ways to improve just culture, how did they increase reporting culture in challenging environments and challenging cultures. We will see some videos from top CEOs in which they are openly recognizing that safety is a priority and it's just not empty words. It's not only that part that we are doing, we are also checking if really safety culture exists in an organization. Again, you may know about our IOSA program. Now it's a risk-based audit program, which checks safety culture on the ground. And it checks safety culture, not asking the safety manager or the CEO, do you have one, but asking and talking to as much as possible operational personnel through really interviewing guys on the shop floor. Do you know about safety? What do you know about safety? How do you report a safety? But basic stuff, simple things that we were not doing before, when the audit was mostly happening in rooms with experts and looking a lot in the manuals. And we have also introduced a maturity criteria for this. So basically, we're looking at the maturity of SMSs, starting from just an established system to a leading system. And we are having wonderful insights into reality, and sometimes the reality needs to be improved. And now the auditors are able to bring up recommendations and to the organizations on how they should be improving to reach, let's say, a mature or leading level. So there are so many ways that we can improve, and we believe we are tackling, let's say, most of these challenges through the proper channels by looking at the organization at all levels, but starting from the top.
And I think that's one of the core challenges. I think generally, you talk a lot about your leadership charter, and then how you use the IOSA audit system to check the reality of that. And I think that's for any organisation, that's something that I think is always a continual work in progress, isn't it? It's how we know what we would like to have as a safety culture, and the ease of positive, having positive safety conversations and people feeling safe to report, and it's how we can help that to be a reality for every staff member in every organisation. There's been a lot of progress made, I think, in the industry generally since the Occurrence Reporting Regulation 2014 came in, but it's a continual challenge. Maybe Nikki, if I come to you next, in terms of organizations and how we can, what kind of advice, I know you do a lot of training for staff and for unions and for organizations, but particularly around, how can you, what does it look like to make these positive safety conversations and just culture a reality?
Yes, John. I mean, just on the back of what Dragos said there, one of the, excuse me, most important areas is a good just culture underpins the safety culture. And if you haven't got that just culture, then you have risking your safety culture. And what we need to do is we need to ensure that there is the support there for individuals, the training first of all, so they understand their company systems and understand how to report, how to be involved, but then also have that support with the relevant feedback, and allow them to express themselves and put forward their concerns without being in a fear culture. And I am seeing more and more that position, especially when the operation is at breaking point, where we've pushed it to the max, and individuals are being asked for more and more and more. And there comes a point they can't do more, and they are regulated, but the company still pushes. And then there's a backlash at times if crew do, especially from a crew point of view, if they do report, then they find themselves in a situation with interviews with management. Now, that is not the just culture, and that doesn't give them the ability to do that reporting. And that does concern us, that this seems to be developing more and more. And one area you did mention as well, when you said about us all understanding each other's jobs and our positions, especially with the ground, the flight crew and ATM, also the management, as Dragos mentioned, senior management, lower management, and also the administration parts, the operations development, they need to understand the business in an entirety, and not just the fact of getting a plane off the ground come hell or high water. And that is the concerns we're seeing at the moment, is that we need that support, we need a just culture, and not be developing a fear culture in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, and indeed, and it's interesting that we had a lot of these discussions when we were in Dublin at our meeting last week as well on promotion, is that when we think one question that came up was that in many organisations, how often do we have conversations about on-time performance, and how often do we have conversations about safety? And I think that's one key point I would ask any organisation, is that yes, delivery of the operational objectives is one thing, but it's to make sure there's that balance, and that quite often it might be difficult to talk about a safety topic, but better to talk about that safety topic and deal with it than put the onus on the individual staff member to solve an operational problem. I remember, I was originally an engineer in a former life before I got into safety, and I remember it was something we always talked about as technicians, is that there were many scenarios where we were having to solve operational problems and take that responsibility on ourselves. And actually, when something goes wrong, if the individual's taken it on themselves, the organisation hasn't helped to manage that, and it's making sure we're not in that situation. Nicola, if I come to you from your side, is that something in the ATM community you have, the way you're set up with supervisors on the control floor, that becomes a lot more real continually, that oversight in the operation, than perhaps in the flight deck where the crew are in the cockpit and somebody else is back in an office? It must be an interesting environment to have to do that in.
We do have a slightly different format for how we operate, and just culture and safety culture are heavily embedded in the ATM community, and all of our reporting is actually done anonymously. So we would use what used to be called the MO, or the mandatory occurrence reporting, and it moved. So we can literally, any incident or accident obviously gets reported, but we have operational reporting as well, where you can literally put in, it's a link on a form, and you can literally put in a query or a request about any of the procedures, the policies, how we do things. So there is very open safety conversations in the ATM world. It's so heavily regulated in terms of how we do procedures and stuff. We've constant review. We do NOS, which is Eurocontrol initiative around normal operation safety surveys. Yes, all of our line managers, so our floor managers, are all ex-controllers who have come up through the ranks, who know intimately how our operations work. And then quite a few of our internal managers would also be ex-controllers who again have come through the ranks. So they would be very intimately aware of the pressures on the floor and of how the thing works. And even I would say for Nikki's part about, how all the other parts, our engineers and our op support people, again, they're quite heavily influenced, quite heavily involved with the operational side of things. So for us in ATM, I think this part, how we see the organisation. John and I have had this conversation. We tend to look at our world in silos. There's the pilots and there's the engineers and there's the controllers. But in reality, aviation is a spider web, because if you touch any part of us, every other part tingles. So that move away from the silo mentality into the spider web mentality, for me, is quite important. Ties in beautifully with our whole concept of collaboration. And Dragos, I was really pleased to hear about the CEO initiative, because that top-down leadership, when mirrored by a bottom-up, insistence on safety, allows us to create this just culture. And Nikki, you're absolutely right. That fear culture we cannot allow to develop, because we have to have open reporting. We have to be able to speak if we see anything that impinges on safety. So yeah, ours is a little different, John, but I do think it ties in with the other parts of the web.
Yeah, indeed, and maybe that's a perfect time to come to Paul, because from the flight deck side, the work you do at ECA, it's you have a lot. You see a lot. I know a lot of those similar challenges, and you work supporting lots of pilots across lots of organisations in different roles, kind of dealing with these kinds of challenges every day.
Yeah, I mean, we see exactly what everybody else here in the round sees. And yeah, we see many operators who are really doing a good job, and I think IATA's initiatives in this field are really great, because especially for us, the more and more of our CEOs do not come from the operational side, so there is a disconnect, and there's probably a tendency that many of them, with all the challenges that the industry has to go through, I mean, all the way up to green transitions and stuff. These people probably, for many, naturally, safety might come as a given. And this understanding that safety is actually something that is produced by thousands and thousands of individuals every single day is a concept that, you know, that we have understood in the operational. I think, you know, and that's what we see. We see a lot of our flight crew who understand their role. But yes, we see a lot of pressures of you know, of middle management, of sometimes top management to push a little more, to, you know, go into captain's discretion, bring the aircraft home, and come on, you can't be fatigued. I mean, these things, we get the information from so many places, and that is something that we try simply to tell our people: don't go there. You know, you own the clock. Whatever happens, you know, don't rush in. Don't let yourself pressured. We try to give, you know, the support also through explaining the regulation, of explaining EASA's role in this, to give our people the support to take the right decisions in order to operate safely, despite the challenges. And, you know, when I tell my people or our people, you know, as pilots or as captains, we are actually hired to be flexible, to make things work, like, you know, like everybody, like ground engineers, like air traffic controllers, but we're also hired, and it's something that we don't dwell on, but we're also hired to be able to say no, or to have the ability to say no at the right moment. And I think that is something that we also need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think it's that part, and that's something, in fact, Nikki, we talked about it before in when we were kind of preparing for the call for this webinar, is that, you know, it's kind of helping staff to feel empowered to say no. And I think, you know, something you've all talked about there is that, you know, if we can support staff in helping them feel that they're able to do that, that's one great step forward. And then similarly, activities like the IATA Safety Leadership Charter, you know, certainly a lot of the strategic conversations we're having, and the things like the EASA Annual Safety Conference, or we've got our Safe 360 conference coming up at the end of September. Is kind of meeting those in the middle, so that everybody feels part of those different activities. So maybe now's a good time to move on, talk a little bit more about the well-being side and staff, particularly as individuals, and how do we help staff get through the summer. You know, we've still got, you know, say the schools are just breaking up. We've got, you know, pretty much most of July, half of July, August, and then into September to go. You know, we talk a lot about the concept of being operationally ready and fit for duty. And, you know, what kind of advice would you give to both organisations and staff in really helping people survive the summer? You know, there's lots of, you know, weather challenges, you know, people working on the ramp in hot sunshine. You know, there's so many different things for people to, and organisations to think about. You know, what kind of things? Maybe Nikki, if I come to you first, because you've got lots of different people working lots of different roles. What kind of things would you be saying to people to help them get through the summer?
It's basically the support. You need to support the staff. We need to look at time constraints. How can we support staff, but we've got time constraints? Aircraft come, they go, they come, they go, they're on the clock. But just to be able to ensure that they do, there's the rushing, that there isn't the pressure that people are rushing, that people are getting the nutrition, you know, they're getting the breaks that they need to just be able to get a drink and something to eat, and the time away from the task. That can have a big influence on somebody's well-being, just to have that break away from the task, to just recoup. I'm not saying 2 days, 3 days, you know, but just a period of time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but take them away from the task and give them that support to recuperate, and come back again. And just have the support from the management to be able to do that. And also protect the mental well-being. As we know, a big part of this is disruptive passengers, a big part. And when crew, for example, or even ground handlers have been part of a disruptive passenger behaviour, again, that support, take them out of the area, support them, what do they need, and find out from them what help they require. Some might not need any, some might need more, but there just has to be that support throughout the system.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important, interesting that you touch on the unruly passenger thing, because we hear, you know, that's one thing certainly I would say to any organisation is how much have you thought, particularly if you have a staff member, whether you say it's on the ground or in the air, has to deal with an unruly passenger, is that it's vital that the organisation supports the staff member or the staff members in in that post-event situation, whether it's filing reports. I heard of one case where, in order to the airline wanted the staff member to do the report and the things with the local police, but effectively there was a young cabin crew member who got stranded down route somewhere to fill out a report with little or no support from the organisation. I think it's just, and actually that comes to the wider challenge of making sure you've gained potential scenarios that your staff are going to face, and have you thought about them and managed those. I saw a really interesting one on LinkedIn. There was an airport where they got together with the local handling agents and they had like a big summer promotion day where every member of staff got in fact, they even looked at which staff already had their own sunglasses and which staff needed some, and staff got, you know, sunglasses, you know, they got UV tops with protected arms, and they all got like special water bottles. And it was just thinking about some of these basic scenarios of challenges people were going to face, and providing a small amount of fairly inexpensive equipment to help people get through the summer. And then, Nicola, maybe I come to you, because we were talking before the call about staff recognition generally, and whether that's through cake in a break or whatever it is. That's so important, isn't it?
We were talking about the ice cream vans.
Yeah, that's it. Ice cream vans.
Yeah, I mean, feeling appreciated in ATM for the last while. Every day seems to be breaking a new record, and you know, we sit in different ANSPs obviously have different rules, but if you're sitting in for 2 hours at a very busy radar scope, or working in a tower for a very busy period, first wave being the hardest one, I think, Paul, you'd agree. Just to have somebody, a senior manager or a line manager, come up and say, look, good job, or, you know, that was, you know, we see you. Being seen is a huge part, I think, of that, being appreciated. And I think the other key as well for the ATM side anyway is how proactive our managers are, because they're conscious of things like weather or high volumes of traffic. That constant, timely, mindful watching how busy it's going to be, what might go wrong, that planning, and acknowledging that to staff, you know, it is going to be busy, we see you. That to me is quite an important part of what we do in aviation.
You know, I think that it's something we've been talking a lot about in the people box of our safety model, is that making everybody feel that the work they do matters to someone in their organisation, and they feel seen, and that, you know, it then links nicely to once you started to recognise staff's contribution, they start to, you know, it starts to lead to improved culture, and, you know, making it easier to have difficult conversations and all of these kinds of things. Paul, from your side, you know, you've got a lot of flight crew flying, you know, lots of long days with many sectors, you know, lots of people flying long haul. There's so many different types of operation out there. You know, what kind of things would you be suggesting that organisations and crews can do to look after themselves this summer?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it has been said already. You know, what I like to tell organizations is that, you know, full-time equivalents are a really good way to make your budget. The rest of the year, you're dealing with humans. And I think that is very important. And many things have been said, Nicola, when you say, you know, you want to be seen. I think that is something very important. People are out there to do a good job. And many of them are in aviation specifically because, you know, they've been attracted to it. You know, it's rarely like, okay, you either go to prison or you go to work in aviation. So it's something, I mean, people there want to do a good job. They are, you know, they are eager, you know, they like their environment despite all the difficulties. And I think as an organization, you need to understand that, and you need to show that you care, and you don't, you know, and you need to be credible about it, which means that, you know, it's not at the start of the summer season, but it's a whole year. You know, this is like, you know, John, you said, you mentioned a marathon, and I know someone who always said, you know, safety is like a marathon without a finish line. And dealing with people and building a psychologically safe environment and a positive culture is also a marathon. And I think the main thing is that it's not you need to be credible. It's not about sending out a memo telling everyone, oh, how you like them, because someone starts. And especially to managers, be on the shop floor, be there and be available to have people ask the uncomfortable questions to you, and be ready to face that, and show them that build the leadership, build the respect, and both as a leader, as a manager, and as an organization. And I think that gives, or should help give, people this safe space to take the right decisions at the right time, whether it's for their well-being or whether it's for the safe operation. So that is very important, and it's a year through exercise, and if you just discovered it a week ago, or if you just discover it after listening to this webinar, I think, well, you're going to have to be at it after summer has ended as well.
And it's interesting what you were saying there about staffing, and particularly, like, you either go to prison or go into aviation. I think, we talk a lot about staff challenges and long-term recruitment issues that we have in the industry right now, with lots of people retiring and the industry continuing to expand. And ultimately, every staff member is an advocate to the people they know for the industry. And I think, when people have negative stories to tell, they share that with their friends and they share that with their family. And, if somebody's child, somebody who doesn't work in aviation but knows somebody in aviation, and their child is thinking of a career in aviation, and they know somebody who told them a bad story, potentially that's one less member of the future workforce. But it's when people tell their friends, and ultimately, the more people who work in the industry who have great stories to tell and still have the passion that many of us have for the industry, that's how we enthuse and excite the next generation to come and join us. And I know, Dragos, from your side, there's lots of things that you're doing at IATA with the industry on those kinds of topics. So
quite interestingly, what we have been doing in educating organizations. Some years ago, we had a task force that was only looking at fatigue. So it was a task force only focused on fatigue. We refocused it, and now it's called the Human Factors Task Force, just to encompass more than just fatigue. And what we have been doing, it's surveying the industry in terms of how they deal, basically airlines, how they deal with human factors. Do they have somebody which is in charge? Do they have a position called a human factors manager or not? Where is it human factors placed? Is it placed in training? Is it placed in the SMS? Is it anywhere? Because obviously we need to do a lot of training on human factors. Very interesting responses, and very diverse from all the regions of the world. On our, let's say, safety LinkedIn that we have, we call the IATA Safety Connect. We have a channel now which deals with human factors, and it is interesting to see the discussions over there and demystifying human error into bringing up, the latest into human performance, on how we need to speak about human performance and the challenges, and moving now towards safety too. I mean, we are so accustomed in this industry to only talk about the negatives, about what is going wrong, and that sometimes just kind of puts an umbrella that is not realistic sometimes on where we are. It's quite new to celebrate success, and we should be celebrating success. And this is how, for instance, we have started in just advertising this information and raising the awareness of the airlines in these topics. That may seem everything needs to be human factors minded. Manuals have to be written by following human factors principles. Which principles? Let's discuss a little bit. Do we all align on what those are and what we can do to improve? So just a simple example on, for instance, refocusing the task force, bringing some human performance experts from the airlines, talking to the airlines, bringing in our conferences, panels on peer support programs, on human factors, and really the small improvements that we can do in those areas.
And I think that's one of the things there's sometimes we suffer from in the industry is, you know, there's so much information. I love particularly, I see lots of discussions, particularly on LinkedIn, about safety 1, safety 2, and safety differently, and all of these different movements. But I think this is where, you know, as an industry, we continually to take steps forward. You know, ICAO Annex 19 and the introduction of safety management has brought lots of benefits. And I think we're at this point where certainly I think we hear lots of conversations about people really trying to understand what good safety management looks like. And as you were saying there, Dragos, it's, well, what does that actually look like in terms of practical actions for people or for organisations this summer? So we're coming down to the last 10 minutes of the session. I was just looking at the questions that we had. So we only had one, so feel free to put any more in. We had one from Mohammed that we mentioned that crew are regulated when it comes to work hours. Is there anything when it comes to maintenance organisations? So not specifically in terms of, you know, there are no like EASA rules like FTL, etc. But there's the European Working Time regulations, and hopefully with SMS in Part 145 coming in, organisations should be applying the same theories of fatigue risk management to all types of staff. And in a sense, that's what risk management's all about, is that applying the principles of, are our staff operationally ready and fit for duty, not just in the areas where there are regulated flight time limitations. I don't know, Nikki, you know, you do a lot of training for particularly ground workers and people who don't have specific flight time limitations or equivalents. Do you have anything else to add on that topic?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of hard work going on over the last few years with regards to the development of the ground handling regulation, which, as we know now, is a regulation and it has an implementation period of up to 3 years. So, and correct me if I'm right, I think it's probably 3 years, January, came out January, I think it was January, February this year. So,
yes.
Yeah, so that is an area where, from a ground handling point of view, it's a very positive area for ground handlers, and we work very closely with the EASA on that, and it was a very good piece of work. So now is the implementation phase, and we need to work together on that implementation, learning from the FTL implementation, and what we should do right or wrong. So yeah, so a lot of support for the ground handling regulation.
Yeah, and as we head towards that coming into force, there'll be a lot. We have a whole promotion program around all sorts of different topics, and particularly around how do you cover things like resilience and, you know, management of risks within your management system, in whether it's ground handling. Similarly with 145, where this is a fairly recent requirement as well. There's lots more promotional additional material coming in. So as we get into that, I'll keep monitoring in case there are any more questions come in. But, you know, maybe if I come to each of you just with a final, if there was one thing that you think we should be doing as an industry this summer that perhaps we haven't talked about, Dragos, maybe I come and put you on the spot first. What would your kind of one single summer message be?
I mean, to me, the reporting system and the functioning of the reporting system, basically listening to the colleagues that are using this reporting system, is of ultimate importance. So I would recommend to everybody, if there is an issue, write it, bring it up to your supervisor, force communication. If the communication is not really something that your organization is keen on, and hopefully that brings this safety improvement that we all hope for, more resilience, and walk the talk instead of just pointing somebody to the procedure and that is it, take it or leave it. Talk about it. If there are concerns from the workforce, yes, talk about it and explain why, for instance, a procedure has to be like that or why not written differently. But I think communication is really the key, even if it sounds very general, but we have seen successes stemming out of this.
And I think that's such a key thing. Actually, we've got 2 articles in the latest Conversation Aviation magazine specifically around communication and that side of things, because without that, actually, everything else kind of falls down, doesn't it? Paul, if I come to you, what would, if you had one thing to finish with, what would it be from your side?
Well, it's I think it's actually 2 things, if I may. I think the first thing
Yes,
is,
definitely.
as an industry and as organizations, I mean, we need to accept that, this summer that, we will be close to breaking point at some, and I hope that, the decisions that individuals take, and in order to safely operate or possibly sometimes not operate the flight is something that is accepted. And then I think out of that, as an industry, we need to come together and, instead of opening the bottle of champagne on 15th of September, that everything went well again, and then forgetting about it until March or April. I think we need to be together and find a way on how we're going to deal with this, because it's not going to be summer, it's going to be more than year-round issues, and they will just exacerbate in summer. And so we need to deal with this as an industry and not at the last moment. I mean, summer campaigns are great. I think it's a deeper issue that we need to deal with collectively. And then finally, to all of us who operate safely, I think it's important to understand, I like the spider's web, but basically we're all a team, whether, your ground handler might be from a different company, but, we're all a team. And I think we should, despite the struggles and the challenges and the pressures, also understand amongst ourselves that whatever we do to bring the aircraft out safely and bring our passengers to destination safety, that we understand each other's struggles and challenges, and we operate as a team, and we're all humans. So I think that is something that we shouldn't forget.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing, is that it's funny enough, in the same way that when we talk about, I remember when we talked about the occurrence reporting regulation and confidential reporting, is that, in theory, if you've got the culture right, then you don't need a confidential reporting system as much as you might think you do. But similarly with the summer campaign, if we're continually thinking about these topics throughout the year, it's less about then a summer campaign or a winter campaign. It's just, part of normal operations. And maybe, Nicola, it's a good time to come to you, Nicola, next, is that for your sort of final thoughts, because that's a lot of what in ATM, a lot of these safety things are embedded in the operation. In fact, we had a question asked in the chat from Mary saying how deeply managers should implement safety. Should they see all safety reports to initiate a risk assessment, or should it just be the safety department? And I think, the look on your face kind of says it all. I think that's the key thing, is no,
everybody.
It's one team, similarly, as Paul said, we're all in this together. And the safety team and the operational side need to be working together.
It's
so,
hand in glove. So safety reports should be not just reported. This is not a tick box exercise for any of us here. Safety reports or incident reports or anything that we put in have to be reviewed. And I mean, we in our own company, we do quarterly reviews and lessons learned, and it's fed back not just to our management grades but to our staff as well. We use all of this even in our recurrent training, our continuation training for each rating that we do. It comes up in discussion forums, and it is very deeply embedded. It's probably difficult for people outside of aviation to understand just how important safety is to us. It is literally the cornerstone of everything that we do. And with that in mind, I suppose my last word would be around that proactive approach. The tighter things get, the more reactive we are. We need to get to a space where we can be proactive and can be constantly, like Paul said, having this discussion. John, like you've been advocating for, making this something that we do because it's not just the right thing to do, but because we can. This is how we do it, that constant improvement. And I think the very final word from me would be about our staff being the most important part of our networking. I know Nikki and I, we talked about the equipment and that sort of redundancy as well. But the passion that you see in aviation staff, whether they are ground handling, whether they're in a tower, whether they are flying the plane, they ooze joy for our industry, and they go the extra mile every single time. And to know that that is an integral part, as much as safety, that passion is an integral part of how we do business. And to acknowledge that, to keep it at the heart, and to protect that. So for all of our air navigation service providers, for our owners, for our regulators, to make sure that in everything that we do, we keep this standard of safety or we improve it, and we protect the people that make that the cornerstone of their world, and that is your staff.
Fantastic. And I think you summed that up perfectly. And maybe, Nikki, we come to you for the final thoughts from your side.
Yeah.
How are you going to follow that?
No, I totally agree there with Nicola. Basically, my position is from an employer point of view, listen to your staff. They're your core of your business. Support your staff, recognise your employees, the human beings. And from an employee point of view, speak out, say no. You know, if you think it's wrong, speak out. Don't be frightened to speak out. The support should be there within the business. And finally, let's hope we have a proactive summer rather than a reactive summer. As Nicola said, better to be proactive than reactive.
And I think certainly from my side as a final thought, I think that's the really big thing is, you know, there are lots of situations that organisations are going to face this summer, but the chances are nothing is going to be something you couldn't have already thought about and predicted. And I know, you know, one organisation I was with not so long ago, they had effectively a set of quick reference cards in the control centre that for a situation arose and there was a card and everybody knew what they were going to do, as opposed to here's a situation we could have predicted, but oh my goodness, now we've got to react. And it's that difference between a proactive and a reactive summer. And I think, you know, as I said, you know, we've said a lot that we talk a lot about the challenges, but as an industry, that particularly since 2022 and the first kind of COVID summer, there's an awful lot of material. I put lots of links in the chat there to different material from the different organisations here. We have the summer safety page that has a lot of that already, and when we post the video from this session that we'll edit down tomorrow and then post, and then the video also from the summer readiness session that we did in Dublin a few weeks ago that we recorded with a number of different airlines, airports and the Irish Authority. We'll post all of those with different links, so they'll be available. And then what we would love is for people, particularly if you're a safety manager or an operational manager, to come and be part of our conversation at the Safe 360 conference and to talk about, you know, these challenges in person and have this continued conversation. And as some of our panelists talked about, you know, it's about a continuous conversation and not just these single moments in time. So huge thanks to the panelists for joining me and giving up their time. I know particularly some of them even, you know, giving up some of the time in their summer holiday, so huge thanks for that. Huge thanks to the audience for being involved and being part of that. The fact that we had lots of people, we didn't have many people drop off, we had an audience that stayed, so thanks for that. And have a great summer, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you at SAFE. Thanks everybody, take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.